And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time.
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? The problem is, when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. Found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But what? It's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your success. I really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get an MLMs. Multi-level marketing, sort of like just like hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich seminars. So it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know. That
was the problem with the FTX. Like they had hidden all their numbers. Like Sam had. This is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you, Sam wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have it wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after like the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over.
Whoa.
Like victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked. A lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the like most fair case you could make about after the fact, he's like he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research, and he said, I don't control Alameda Research, even though he was the owner. He's no longer. I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world. And that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's like maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. Might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys or
whiz kid, who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like I listened to previous interviews before he got busted. Finance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box. As a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried, he didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, "Hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good."
Whoa! And what did he say to that? Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16 really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange, just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see them in nice cars, and so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch of
analogy for losing your house.
You know what's funny? Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say
regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like, what could they have possibly done to make it easy? Figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already. I mean, even leading up, like CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but like already. Like a day before, and it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations,
this stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. You know, for one of the first times, it was kind of right people in charge who are going to take the fall. You resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. The son of Harvard lawyers. We just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But annoying. So
we don't need that.
The famous example is like Coinbase is in America and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded. The money system has to be safe. Like, your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like, or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to you withdraw. There's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address because you send it to a different one. Find out like there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, you know, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy, Dan. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to move it. That's what FTX. So CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know. Whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. So like, the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred.
One guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their Z on Twitter. I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and so they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. I'll have to my feeling is offshore entities should not be they're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore I don't know. It's from the the arms of one huckster to another. Like it's just like almost to something worse. They're a company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he knew these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. So this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos. There's wire transfer and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal. And we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there. And all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people are like, and basically like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later. But you actually own a bunch. They've recently been shut down. But the idea was
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better
all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. Don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few
something, because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why I said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws? They never ended up doing that, this stuff. And you start to have repeat occurrences. Like, I just cover stuff all the time, and you see echoes of the same thing. I just had somebody just a couple of days ago I was interviewing for this news scheme we're looking at, and he said, so he decides to donate dark to a Republican, to Republicans. And part of the accusation is he knowingly did this through one of his launches, FTX, in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
Everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, it means playing League of Legends while on investor calls. Like, at the time, that was seen as this charming, genius thing.
On calls.
On calls. You could hear, even actually, okay, so can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it?
No, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like, they had a Serum token, which they control most of. F money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable $10 million, or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police, and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? These guys, basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys, investment funds? They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. It's sort of hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, there's always a new health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they? It is inevitable. So, something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that there's nothing here, but the problem is that with all these other guys buy into him,
right?
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, well, that guy did it. What? It's the hottest deal. Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. It is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is being complicit on a leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam.
Down, because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Yeah, But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me. I used to be just like you, Joe, but then I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And I used to fail, but by these little tricks,
it was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
It's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store. I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to end up with a sales pitch. Like, it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch. Mm-hmm. So I didn't, or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in in a stew. Abilities, it's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's what
her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this. There were things that were coming out, like questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. I mean, go start trading with it, unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. All these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. Or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was. Some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I was just there was something different about the reaction to it. And Vic, I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with hucksters and fraud, where, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. Reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's they need to they kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying we think they're insolvent, because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token. Touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. It's almost like a bank. You deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money. Caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? I forgot. It's so silly. It's you find there was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, it's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto, because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem, handle now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep. Actually, campaign finance laws, I've heard, are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate. What he said in one of the interviews, he goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark, because no one believes anyone would be everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly. Was going to undo sort of everything. If you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money
So
there.
is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
Dark, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually ads, like get rich quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis, telling you, they're like 25 years old, telling you, you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million.
Crypto.
Ransomware. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. Most of this 10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, sort of information about that. He says, hey, we're actually said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had a look at their books. Like it was very opaque. Everything. I don't have access to the book. Like I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda what that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party to their other friends. They're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people.
It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. Like you believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like of was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big, like, kind of scam, he's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like, I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that.
Sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme, not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became, and eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job, like be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're done. He launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money and we're going to do that.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to – he's doing interviews with that middleman because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin. Like no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money and then you can to expose. But like I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about. You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put it, what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then it's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, if you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China. Like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big deal. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you win FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
Assets, you can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
That is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver, right? The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. Like it's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time. And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through him for like all these, where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like, this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put and she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like this ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery.
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why
huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes. Because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So, but I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people you can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain all our. So I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was like just me discovering like, well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course and then what? Well, at the end, when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, I start covering it. And then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to stop making these videos. You have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange, and I'd go because it was like my friends like said, hey, we have to get somebody, you want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was like kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys. And I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist.
I don't really understand what's going. Like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
like you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, guy who enabled God or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just like,
well, how does he skate on that? Like, how
senator's office reached out to me. They're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to, this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, his whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called, he thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, if I
and sell off all his tokens, would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this an
LGBTQ plus causes? And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through, who's very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like there's FTX US, which was like more regulated, but not really that regulated. It's, fight, like one of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets, like take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that because, or, something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, and then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX, and that's ultimately what he was doing, but it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. The CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did her setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to